Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. Welcome to another episode of Send in the Community with me, Hafiz Mohammad Umar, here on Inspire 105.1 FM. And tonight we are celebrating World Teachers Day. You might think, wow, what's World Teachers Day? Well, it's an initiative that was launched several years ago to highlight the incredible work of teachers around the world, and certainly in the United Kingdom and in our own small towns, villages, larger cities, wherever we happen to live. I think it's only fair to say that teachers are amongst those many millions of unsung heroes who go about the daily work without really expecting much in return. And we know that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is considered the greatest of all teachers, and there's a huge element of respect that we carry for that. And our focus in Sending the Community is going to be around those special teachers of special education needs and disabilities, and the role they play in ensuring that young people with added needs get every opportunity to succeed in life. And tonight, I'm going to be speaking to some of those amazing teachers. And first of all, I have Sister Zahida with me. Assalamu alaikum to you, Sister Zahida.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming, and welcome aboard Sending the Community. It's wonderful having you joining us tonight. Could you tell us a bit about yourself, please, and a bit about your professional role?
Yep, sure. So can I just first of all start by saying that congratulations. I really appreciate you starting this, because I think SEND is an area which kind of the focus on it really lacks in the Asian community. So I'm really glad that you've started something like this.
Thank you.
So my background is in primary school, and I've come from a mainstream school.
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago, I was approached by my current head teacher, who said that I've seen how you work, I'd like you to come and work for me in my school, and it's a trauma-informed school. So what that means is that children who come to us have experienced some form of trauma,
Mm-hmm.
either in their homes or at schools or in their lives. And I resigned from our school. I'd been there for 5 years, and I thought it's time to move on. And I thought, oh, great opportunity for me to learn, about children who have needs. And I went to my current school thinking I was going to be like Mary Poppins. I was going to sing and dance and everything's going to be fixed. And I realized it's nothing like that. So the pupils we have autistic children. And of course, it's like a range. So we've got some children with mild autism, some with extreme. We also have pupils who have Prader-Willi syndrome, which you can't see, but we're aware that he has it. Also, we have pupils who have alcohol fetal syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
So all of this, I thought I knew something about autism, or I knew something, until I came here, where I have this experience of working with these difficult but incredibly amazing young people. And I'm still on a path to learn about all the disabilities, some that you can see, some you can't. It's a long road. It's difficult, but I do feel, and this is, I'm not talking about myself, but obviously people who are working in my school, or people who work in other schools with children who have needs, I think it's such an honor to be with such people. Yeah, it's difficult, but it's at the same time it's rewarding. Our children don't always know how to express their feelings, so often it comes out in a very violent form. So you get home and you're like knackered and you're tired and you kind of bruised a little, and then when you step back and you think that these children have needs, and something that we need to learn a bit more about. And I think that the more we become aware of autism, because I learned about autism in my previous schools, just like it was like a tip of the iceberg. And the more I learn, then the more I feel that, more people need to learn about these kind of disabilities. You kind of get so bogged down with work, they don't have time. And I think more and more schools should be training their teachers to be able to deal with SEN children. And we have a little bit, but not as much. And often our children are not diagnosed. So you often see a behavior and you're like, this child's been like this because of this. So yeah, I think it's very important for us to learn more about children with autism or all these unseen conditions. And especially because I'm from London, and we have a large Asian community, and I really think there's something lacking in that. And going back to what I mentioned earlier, was I'm really glad that you're doing something like this, and we need more and more people, because the more we know, the more we can help our pupils, and of course they're going to be our future generation. So so thank you for doing, starting something like this, and
thank you for sharing your expertise there, Sister Zahida. Certainly, neck of the woods here in Luton and Bedfordshire, we try to be as active as we can when it comes to special education needs and disabilities. But there were a few points you mentioned which appear to be forming some kind of a pattern around our community and SEN. You mentioned the fact that there appears to be this reluctance from within our community when it comes to getting a diagnosis for any special education needs or a disability. If I went back some 20 years ago when I did my teacher training in Bradford, in West Yorkshire, and this kind of stigma, taboo towards SEN, being some kind of like second class thing, was very prominent within our British Asian community at the time. And then when I moved down south and I worked in some neighbouring counties like Hertfordshire and Buckinghamshire, and there the attitude was almost the opposite. There were parents at my door saying, "Why is my child not getting the grade they are meant to be working to? Could there be an underpinning SEN here? What are you going to rule that out?" Which was amazing. And that's the kind of attitude we ought to be adopting. And then when I back into Luton again, I think it's something within our community that we haven't quite appreciated, that Allah has brought us all so uniquely, and that it's okay to have an added need. It is not a bad thing. And, so long as with the added support, if you can get the support you need or the arrangements you need for exams, for example, you can actually be playing on a level field and get the very most out of your education. And that you pretty much echoed the field we have here in Luton. I think there is still work to be done. I'm just going to remind our listeners, if they have just tuned in now, that you are listening to Sending the Community Show here on Inspire 105.1 FM with me, Hafiz Mohammad Umar. And this evening we are celebrating World Teachers Day with a focus on specialist teachers of special education needs and disabilities. And with me I have Sister Zahida, who is a specialist teacher at a trauma-based school in London. And we are just sharing our thoughts on how our community's attitude towards SEN appears to be at the moment, and what we perhaps can do to ensure that changes for the better. You mentioned a trauma-based school, Sister Zahida, and you defined that earlier. In terms of numbers in your school, how many students and what sort of age group do you work with?
So the youngest is 10 and the oldest is going to be 18. We did have a young man. He was 25, but he was taught offsite, but he was part of our school. He had schizophrenia. So our children we can take children from the age of 8 up to 18. Anyone above that, it's another section, but they get taught offsite. We've got about 15 children.
15. So is it like alternative provision?
Yeah, kind of alternative provision. These are children who've been like, kind of kicked out because of their behavior. And I think that is stemmed from not understanding because not all disabilities are seen. So not understanding the child, there are underlying issues. And of course, what happens is that, trying to get some kind of diagnosis or to get speech and language to come into your school or educational psychologists come in, it's such a long waiting list. So these children have been like kind of kicked out of all the other schools. And so we're kind of there to accept, okay, we'll bring them on. So yeah, we've got 15 children, not all on site, some are off site. So on site we have around about 11, and we've got 22 staff to teach them.
Right.
And they range from autism to Prader-Willi syndrome to fetal alcohol syndrome, ADHD. Yeah.
And you mentioned there about different conditions, and also how young people perhaps might have experienced some degree of punishment as a consequence of their actions in the previous schools in the past prior to coming to you. I think that is another important part to touch on. When I worked in a special school a few years ago, and we had trauma-based training, and we were shown brain scans of 2 children at the age of 3. And when we looked at those scans, there was a marked, distinct difference between the two. One appeared to have been like a squashed sponge, and the other one was like an open sponge. And they said that the doctor who delivered this presentation talked about early life trauma shrinking the brain of the child, which is quite shocking. And when we speak about that being invisible, that is so true. And often when young people are being reprimanded due to so-called poor behavior without any attention to the underlying reasons, I think that's where the conversation really needs to be had. If it's a one-off behavior and the child has deliberately chosen to make an error, deal with that one way. But when it's repeated, it's triggered by a particular sound or movement or a particular activity, then surely that sends lots of questions around what could be triggering it. And certainly in the fact that you work in a trauma-based school, who also have added diagnosis of different conditions, as you mentioned earlier. Anything that makes that more challenging, but equally rewarding, if I may say. Certainly from my experience, when we talk about children with SEN becoming violent, most of us who have worked in special schools or with children with special needs will understand the fact that at times these young people will lash out without intentionally hurting another person, but sometimes unfortunately, we end up taking blows, and that's where that degree of skill comes in. Team teach training that comes to mind when it comes to handling young people for their own safety or safety for them. And how does that kind of like sound in terms of the situation in your setting at the moment? Is it very similar to what I just described there? Is it different?
So when you were talking, it felt like you were my colleague and you were in my school.
For listeners, we've never met. This is the first time I'm interviewing Sister Zahida here. So
you were in my school, you know exactly what I've kind of been through today or Friday. I just would like to say though, if you asked me, if I spoke to you 2 years ago when I was in my mainstream school, at that time, and I'm quite embarrassed to say this, hands up, embarrassed, and alhamdulillah, Allah's taken me out to open my eyes to this. But in my old school, I would have thought, right, this child is just really disrespectful. They're not listening. They're being rude, whatever. But I've been lucky enough to have lots of training. So the school where I work at, they give a lot of training. And it's opened my eyes up to things that something that you just never ever think of, or I'd never ever thought about it. And if I now go back to mainstream school and have a child, I so know that I'm going to approach it so differently. I am going to come with my, empathetic point. I will, so we use this term trauma lens. So I will see a child through my trauma lens to see, what is going wrong. Uh, and actually, what happened was one of the reason I said yes to my current head teacher. Well, the very last year where I was in my old school, I had a child. He was so violent, and he just dysregulate. And then I had to have training on how to hold him. And I remember used to think that, this child just needs me to listen to him. And of course, mainstream school is an academy. You've got a whole lot of numbers that you got to make sure that are up to date in terms of, when you have your meetings with the head teachers, and you've got to get this done. And I just so wished that I just had a moment to sit with his child. And now when I think back at him, there was so much going on in his house. But because of the situation you're in as a mainstream school, you've got to just move on. You don't have time to talk to a child. So I think my approach would be so different. And this is where I think the government needs to do more. And, I'm saying this knowing fully well that they've made so many cuts to the sense
100%.
schools, and the sense education is so embarrassing, and it's shameful because instead of supporting teachers to learn more about children's traumas, more about disabilities, more about autism, not one-off. Like I had dyslexia training once in this 15 years that I've been a teacher. Once. You cannot expect to just get on with it. And I'm sure you know that with dyslexia, the amount of behavior that comes up, instead of understanding the child, you're just like, okay, child's not listening, they're rude, this, that, and the other. And I think more should be done to teach the teachers in mainstream schools so our children don't have to have different schools. More needs to be done to teach our children in mainstream schools to say, there's children who are different. Because one, I love my school. I love the job. Although it's very difficult, I love the job that I do. One thing that for me personally, is a drawback is that, how in mainstream school, you have lots of children and you have lots of positive behavior as well. And you often say, the children copy each other. So the only drawback about my school is that because we have children who can be quite violent, a lot of behavior is copied.
Yeah.
So that's the only drawback. But I think if we did more for mainstream schools and make not have separate schools, which is good in a way, but we want to incorporate our children to mainstream schools, say, you know what, this child is autistic, and that's fine. We can learn so much from each other. This child has this syndrome or this condition, to try and incorporate them in mainstream schools so they're part of the society, so they don't feel stigmatized. And I think in the discussions that I've had with some of my pupils, I think there's an element of I'm different, hence I go to a different kind of school. So like for instance, one pupil, he's autistic and he's got Prader-Willi syndrome. When he speaks about his brother and sister, how they go to I'm quoting normal school, and I come to this school, and I don't know how to explain to him or make him feel like, no, this is also a normal school.
Absolutely.
So we need to incorporate more of this in mainstream schools so that you don't have to go to a special needs school like I have. I wish I knew all of this when I was in my mainstream school. I think I would have been such a different teacher. I really would have been, and I wish more teachers would be taught about this. So it doesn't have to be a different school you need to go to. You can be in the same school and cater for children. So, and then same with, I think, and I think there's an element, I think in the Asian community a bit like, there's an element of like embarrassment, and you're like, no, we need to normalize all of this. To say, no, your child is different. They come with their own gifts. And I remember, may Allah forgive me if I get this wrong, but there was like a hadith where Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he would have sahabis who were like blind. He would treat them in a certain way to adapt for them.
Absolutely.
This is part of our tradition to treat everyone with love and respect and acceptance. And I think we need more of this. in our mainstream schools, as well as in our own Asian community. There's a big gap in that.
Yeah.
And I think if parents just found out, if just we tell the parents, you know what, it's okay, I think they will be very open to, very accepting. It's just getting to a point, talking to parents and say, you know what, it's okay, we're here to support you. Yeah, these discussions need to be had.
Yeah, absolutely. And there were a couple of things you mentioned there, amongst many amazing suggestions of what we can be doing to be more inclusive as a community. And the terminology, I think, is so important. You use the word normal. Just last night, I was talking to somebody about my area of expertise and my field of work, and somebody said to me, "Oh, do you work in a special school or in a normal school?" And I don't,
exactly.
I don't think they were for a minute discriminating at all. But the way it came out so naturally, and I said, well, all schools are normal schools, or normal is how you perceive them. And they were like, oh, well, you know what I mean? Is a normal school or a special school? Well, I think that's where we need to have a really nice conversation about what does actually normal mean. What is it?
Exactly,
if you mean mainstream school, that's fair enough. Otherwise, I enjoy working in special schools, and that's something that I thoroughly try to advocate for and ensure most young people with special needs and disabilities are not forgotten, whether they're in a mainstream or in a special school, and there's whole ways of ensuring they're included. And you mentioned there about, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam love and compassion, particularly for those with disabilities. And that is something that we still need to better ourselves on when it comes to places of work, especially in our masajid. It's an area that I'm currently trying to explore and offer that training and support to them. And the fact that we are in a situation where, alhamdulillah, many of our young people attend the masjid regularly, which is fantastic. But if the masajid actively keep an SCM register, how often it is with the families, how many of the application forms have the SCN box there to ensure that the teachers and the staff are able to understand, let alone get training. Alhamdulillah, since I started this initiative, I've come across many amazing people like Sister Sarah Mangara, I mentioned earlier. Who runs the mosque, for example, or Brother Abdul Hakim, who runs the Islam for the Deaf. And there are many other amazing people coming across there. Through Jannah, special school up in Blackburn. And these are some of the amazing individuals who are going out there. In Luton, we have 4 friends of Bright Eyes who do amazing work for young people, especially with disabilities. And I think it's important for us to ensure that their voice is heard, they are included, and whilst they might be small in number, what we need to be working towards is getting our mainstream masajid system to be more inclusive, to understand the fact that there is nothing to be afraid of when it comes to SEN, and with the degree of training and support, you can be more inclusive. Some of our masajid, mashallah, now have accessible doors, which is wonderful from when we were kids, some 30 years ago.
Definitely.
Might have an accessible toilet, which is, I guess, not very many. But then it's beyond that. What are you doing to the educational element is also inclusive. There is an element of differentiation, and there are many fun ways of better educating our whole community.
Absolutely.
We are running out of time for this first part. I think we have just under 2 minutes remaining. Sister Zahida, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Listening, if you're just tuned in, you're listening to Send in the Community with me, Hafiz Mohammad Umar. Today we are talking about World Teachers Day, which is going to be celebrated around the world on Saturday, the 5th of October, 2024. And our focus here on our show is around those amazing people who work within specialist units or within special departments in mainstream schools. And Sister Zahida is one of those. Mashallah, she worked in a trauma-based school in London, and we're just heading towards a short break. Sister Zahida, just in the next 15 seconds or so, if you just want to summarize what you had to say earlier, please.
I think first of all, thank you for having this platform where more Muslim or Asian people are coming together to be able to talk about SEND needs. I think it's still very much taboo, but I think the more we speak about it, the more awareness it brings, and then it won't become taboo, and we can support the community more. That I just want to say that. So thank you, Brother Mohammed, for doing this.
Thank you so much for joining us. Listeners, please come back straight after the break, where I'll have another great speaker with me. Thank you so much.
Sure. Okay, so.
Salam.
This program will continue after the break. Continue listening to Inspire FM. Inspire FM.
Inspire 105.1 FM.
Why do Tops Pizza deliver the top pizzas in Luton and Dunstable?
For a start, all the toppings are 100% halal, and Tops use fresh dough every day. Then there's the cheese, the highest quality available. And when it comes to food preparation, cleanliness is taken as part of our faith. So that just leaves the taste, choice, and great offers, including buy one, get one free on all medium, large, and extra large pizzas. Tops Pizzas, Wellington Street, LU1 5AA. Order online, topspizza.com or via Just Eat. Download our app or call 01582 72 5000.
For expert legal advice and support, talk with Luton's leading solicitors, Hannah Solicitors. We specialise in conveyancing, wills and probate, family law, immigration and personal injury, legal matters that matter to you. Our experienced legal team are here to help you through every step of the way. Call 01582 329 069. That's 01582 329 069, or click on hannahsolicitors.co.uk. Hannah Solicitors, professional advice with a tailored approach.
आप लुटन से समात फरमा रहे हैं। इंस्पायर FM 105.1 24 घंटे हफ्ते के 7 दिन नए दिलफरेब प्रोग्राम से बहलाए ये मन।
Are you thinking of starting a podcast or looking to give your podcast a new home? Why not hire Inspire FM's dedicated recording studio? With rates starting at just £25 per booking, our podcast studio is a fully functional, acoustically treated space for up to 4 people, and it's set up and ready to use as soon as you arrive. For more information or to inquire about booking, email us at info@inspirefm.org or send us a DM on our social media accounts at InspireFM Luton.
Biscard Pharmacy, your one-stop health and beauty pharmacy in Luton. Stockist of over 8,000 health and beauty products. At Biscard Pharmacy, we offer a range of services, including health advice and repeat prescriptions for collection and delivery to your home. We also offer a Hajj and Umrah vaccination. Come in and see us and ask about our Stop Smoking service. We're open 7 days a week till late, including bank holidays. Biscard Pharmacy, 157A Biscard Road, Luton. Call 457709.
Every day, millions of people face life-threatening challenges. War, disaster, hunger. The need for your support has never been greater. At Action for Humanity, we believe in the power of compassion. Around the globe, we provide life-saving aid and long-term support to communities in crisis. Already, you've empowered us to reach 15 million people since 2011. Visit actionforhumanity.org or call us on 0161 860 0163 today.
Do you feel at times that you just can't cope anymore? Do you find raising a child in today's society challenging? Join me in my parenting show where I aim to discuss these challenges of raising our children, ranging from nurturing sentiment to building the leaders of tomorrow. Every Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. live with Sister Navid on Inspire FM or via our Inspire FM Facebook page. The parenting show at 7 p.m. every Tuesday evening on Inspire FM.
From the studios of Inspire FM, the time is now 7:30.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. Welcome to the community with me, Hafiz Mohammad Umar. And if you were tuned into the first half of the show, you will know that today we are talking about World Teachers Day, which is going to be celebrated on Saturday, the 5th of October 2024. And World Teachers Day is meant to help us all appreciate the wonderful work our teaching colleagues are doing around the world and also in our small town of Luton and throughout the rest of the United Kingdom. And ahead of World Teachers Day 2024, I wanted us to be able to speak to some of those amazing teachers who either specialize or have worked in special education needs or disabilities or in special schools in the past. And before the break, we had Sister Zahida with us, who shared her experiences with us. And now I'm going to be joined by Sister Sharon, who works at a large school in London. Hi, Sharon.
Hello, how are you?
Very well, thank you. And welcome aboard. It's wonderful having you at FM.
Thank you for having me.
Brilliant. And Sharon, tell us a bit about your field of work when it comes to special education needs and disabilities, please, because you worked in a very amazing setting before your current role.
Okay, so I currently work in like you said, in a large school in London. Just over 1,500 students. That can be a little bit challenging in itself, especially for, you see young people, little year sevens when they first arrive and they're trying to negotiate all the different rooms and the different timetable and everything. Before that, I worked in a pupil referral unit. Did my first 2 years as a teacher in a PRU. And I've also worked in a school for young people with social, mental, and educational needs, health needs.
Yep. Okay. So let's start with the pupil referral unit then. So for our listeners out there who might not know what a PRU or a pupil referral unit is, can you tell us a bit about how that differs from a mainstream education setting, please?
Okay. Very, very different. We had, I think it was 21 students in the whole school.
Wow.
All of the classes had support teachers, and so you had your mainstream teacher that was teaching the subject. You'd have one or two what we'd call a TA or higher learning teaching assistants in there, and then we also had other members of staff who were there, psychologists. We had I'm just trying to think. We had psychologists that just specialized in play. It was a very different setting. It was very much looking at the whole child, is the way that I'm going to describe it. We had workers who were just there just to interact with the parents. Yeah, very much looking at the whole child and what their needs were. It was a very, I think it was actually quite different to a lot of other PRUs.
Yeah. And when you say 21 students in the whole setting compared to over 1,000 in your current setting, that is a big, big difference. And for our listeners who might not have had that kind of exposure in the past by school settings. That is quite common amongst the PRUs, the people referral units, that they usually are smaller in number. And the reason being is because the needs of those young people are much more demanding than in a semi-mainstream school. And what sort of age group did you deal with in that particular unit?
I was looking at Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4. So you're looking at secondary from year 7 up to year 11. Yeah.
So 11 to 16 age range. And in terms of the structure of the day, did they have a full day like we do in a mainstream school, starting at approximately 8:30 until 3:15 in the afternoon, or an hour-long lesson, or what the differences there?
It was 9 until 3. They had a morning break. I'm trying to think now. It's a bit of a while ago. So they had a morning break. They had an hour lunch break. And there was 1 hour setting in the evening. So I think it was 3. It's like worked out to be about 3 lessons over the course of the day.
Right. Okay.
There's more breaks involved. Yeah. And they arrived. So it was like I said, looking at the whole child. So they'd arrive and have breakfast. Everyone had breakfast together.
Yeah.
How was your evening? How's your day so far? And then go into teaching.
Yeah. And the students that ended up at the pupil referral unit, would that have been through a referral from the school, through the local authority, or were the parents able to apply to be?
I think mainly the school and the local authority. Unfortunately, it's usually, they've been moved on from one school to another, and then they end up in the pupil referral unit.
I'm just trying to compare it to the last special school I worked in, where we had students coming in at around 9:10 in the morning. They were all transported from within the whole county.
Yeah, they got their transport.
And once they got to the school, they would have then had a 20-minute morning registration until about 9:30. As you say, that those 20 minutes meant just catching up with the students, gradually settling them into the school day. If you compare that to mainstream schools, 9:30 in the morning in some schools is almost the end of lesson 1, whereas that's when they were getting ready to start the day. And then each lesson was 45 minutes. So lesson 1 would have taken them until 10:15, and then about 5-minute movement break to get to the second lesson. And then at 11 o'clock, they had a morning break for 20 minutes. And then there was another 40-minute lesson, because that took them to 12 o'clock. Then from 12 till 1 again, an hour's lunch break. And then another, in fact, an hour and 10 until 1:10. And then it was a 20-minute afternoon registration. And then at 1:30, they would have gone into lesson 4 for 45 minutes, and then at 2:15 into lesson 5, and they finish at 3 o'clock, and then 10 minutes back at registration form base to get the belongings and get ready for the buses. So a day in the life of a special school compared to the secondary school was very different, and certainly the way you described the pupil referral unit was also different.
Yeah.
And were there elements of interventions that you were offering at the pupil referral unit? Did the students have to work on particular skills, social, emotional, or were they more sort of like subject orientated?
It's a mix. So they all did maths, English, and science, and then there was it would have been trying to get at Key Stage 4 young people who haven't had regular schooling, trying to get them into something that's work-based. They've been either in apprenticeship or getting them a job with a small company where they could have done their training and like worked up. And then because we had school psychologists and therapists, so they would have been working with those people one-to-one.
Amazing. And then the image unit that you worked at, what was that like?
It was similar, actually, in terms of the structure of the day, and I don't want to say the capacity of the students, but I think it was very much looked at more of a nurturing, a nurturing environment where it isn't just all, mainstream schools sometimes can just be all about the academic, or the majority of it is about the academic, and not look at, the needs of where these young people are. I think we forget that not all children have what I'd call it a straight childhood, where they're in environments where they are loved and cared for. Sometimes they're with people who are unable to give them the structure that they need. And unfortunately, sometimes school needs to step in and do some of that.
Absolutely. I think that's where the need for our community to understand a whole host of special education needs and disabilities, and the relevant education setting is so crucial, because British, Asian, Black communities seem to think that our children will go through mainstream education, they'll all come out, they'll go to college or university, and that's the kind of expectation they set without realizing that actually for each individual child, it's incredibly important for them to get the right education setting, and there are lots of options available from the initial process to actually then getting them into that kind of education setting as well. And in terms of anybody listening out there who might be thinking, my school teacher is telling that my child might be under the SEMH category at the moment, but I'm not reluctant to accept this. What would your advice be to them?
I think it can be difficult because your child and you want the best for them. And I know that, within my community, my family's Jamaican, I come from a Caribbean background. People are very wary of having labels put on their children. I would say that you need to make sure that you're able to communicate with the school, that you're open to the conversations. You need to be open. You know what your child's capable of, and make sure that they get the support that they need within school. Like I said, I'm currently working at quite a large mainstream school, but we have a great Senko. The SEND department is amazing, and they do a lot to ensure that us as teachers, we sometimes fall short. We've got 30 children in a class and we're trying to do what we're supposed to do for the whole, that we are able to, differentiate the work and make sure that there's some adaptation in the lesson plan.
Brilliant. Sharon, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Been an absolute pleasure having you with us. And we wish you all the well for your future career as an amazing teacher. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Happy World Teachers Day.
Thank you. Right, listeners, you are listening to Sending the Community here on Inspire 105.1 FM with me, Hafiz Mohammad Umar. And in today's show, we've had some incredibly powerful people. These are specialist teachers in the Send community, specialist teachers of special education needs and disabilities. And we've heard from two of them already. Now we are going to be joined by Lauretta. Welcome to you, Lauretta.
Thank you.
It's great having you on our show. Lauretta, if you could tell us a bit about yourself and your professional background, please, in teaching and your involvement in the world of SEN.
Okay. Hello, everybody, and thank you for having me. So I have always had a flair for teaching long before I joined teaching. Before I joined teaching, I worked in the NHS as a biomedical scientist. Wow. And I was involved in schools as a STEM ambassador, so promoting science, engineering, maths in schools. And it was fun to do lots of exciting experiments for children, because the whole idea was getting children to enjoy and experience what science is, because it's seen traditional as a very difficult subject. So anyway, long story short, I went into teaching and I trained in mainstream school. And what I found out in mainstream school was that a lot of children who had SCND, not necessarily have been diagnosed, were always getting in trouble. They were always getting in detention. They will always be the ones that are disruptive. And it was a circle for a lot of these children. And ultimately, sometimes some of them are excluded. And, but it took me to actually take time to understand the children, to realize that actually a lot of our children had some form of SEND. And what I know now, working in a specialist setting for children who have got SEND, is behind every behavior, there is a need. So it's important to find out what that need is. You might have a young person who cannot articulate his struggle. They might not understand what the teacher is trying to say. And the only way that they can tell the teacher comes off as being rude. And they are sent off, and all that, So so that it plagued me a lot. So eventually I went into the specialist education sector, and this was a sector I found out that we did not have a lot of subject specialist teachers. There's a lot of reasons around that, but it's been eye-opening because, especially for me, in the last 4 years, most of the children I've worked with have not thrived in mainstream schools. We've had them to a point where they can trust us, their needs are being met, and a lot of them have had 4 years in a row where students who were excluded from mainstream school have sat GCSEs and have done well. So it's amazing to see a young child who has been off school for 2 years, not engaging with education, and then begin that journey with them up to year 11, and they're sitting exams and doing well in these exams.
Absolutely. That is incredibly amazing. And listeners, the reason I'm talking to these amazing teachers in today's show is because on Saturday, the 5th of October, is the World Teachers' Day. And people around the world will be celebrating this amazing day, thanking teachers who have been involved in their lives to have inspired them to get to where they want to be. And our focus here on Sending the Community is particularly around teachers of SEND, teachers of special education needs and disabilities. And as Lauretta was saying there, the added challenges both the students and teachers face when dealing with somebody with a special education needs and disability, and how at times in mainstream education, it becomes even more difficult to get somebody diagnosed with an SEN and then have the relevant support in place for them. So tell us about your current role then, please, Lauretta. What sort of setting do you work in at the moment?
Okay, so I work in an independent specialist school for children who have got autism. So every single child in the school has got an EHCP plan, and I teach and lead science. As well, apart from teaching and leading science, I'm also what you call the designated teacher for looked after children. So any child who is in care, who has been involved in care, I am the link teacher between the schools. So it's a way of is that extra level of making sure that the most vulnerable of our sent children do not fall through those holes and cracks that are in the system.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a crucial role that, being able to lead a subject in a special setting is alone challenging enough. And then being the designated teacher for children looked after is also a highly significant role within all schools, and particularly in a special setting, because the vulnerabilities are so significant there. And in terms of the age groups and the size of the school, what age groups do you deal with? How many students in total at the school?
Yeah, so that's in the last 3 years we have expanded. So at the moment we're almost nearing about 140. In the last year we have increased to early years foundation. So we've started having even the youngest, which is amazing to have that happen, all the way to 6th form. So yeah, so quite a broad range.
19.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's amazing. And I think our listeners, what you will find is that sort of age is becoming more sort of like predominant around the education system. I know there are lots of all through academies up and down the country, and so especially settings are also becoming more open to that. So, a child might remain in one school for anything between 10 to 15, 16 years, even perhaps. And there is a lot of nurturing and routines going around that. And then from year 9 onwards, the element of preparation for adulthood comes in. I spoke about this a couple of weeks ago on our show here, and the significance of ensuring that those young people are able to access the community once they are getting ready to leave the setting. In terms of a typical day at your school, then, what does that look like? When do the children first come in? How long is each lesson for? When do they have breaks, lunches? When do they finish the school?
Okay, yeah. So that's the main difference between our school or any SEN school from mainstream school is, so for our students, they come from very, very far away. So they will usually coming to school in taxis. So again, long journeys. So what they do is once they are in school, they go into the dinner hall, the hall where they have breakfast. So, that is standard across school. So it's an excellent opportunity to, interact with the children and begin to pick up on those things that might be a trigger later on in the day. So, so it sets the tone for that day. So after breakfast, our students now go into their different classes or forms. They have form times with teachers. So when we are looking at a class, we've got a maximum at the moment of, say, 8 students in a class. And within the class, we've got the form tutor, we've got higher level teaching assistants as well as teaching assistants. So what will happen is that's the timetable for the day, because for our children, they need that structure and routine, so reminders, visuals, everything. And then the first lessons start. So our school is split into the formal side, where students are accessing the same subjects they would do in mainstream school, as well as the semi-formal side. So, and our lessons are 45 minutes short, so not like the usual 1 hour you'd find out in mainstream school. And even within the 45 minutes, depending on the needs of the students, they have got movement breaks. So all that is incorporated. For our more independent learners, all they have to do is ask if it's okay, they'd like to take a movement break, and they are able to. For our younger ones, sometimes our support staff know that they need a movement break, and they are supported and they can return back. So lessons are short, lots of visuals,
Yeah.
And
what time do the children finish in the school day then?
yeah, so our students, so school day finishes for student at 3:15, because the whole idea is by 3:30. So sorry. So all lessons would finish at 3:15, and then students have another 15 minutes to almost have a chilled down before they go into their taxis.
Lauretta, thank you so much for sharing all that with us. We are running out of time. Listeners, you've been listening to Send in the Community with me, Hafiz Mohammad Umar, here on Inspire 105.1 FM. And today we've been talking about World Teachers Day, which is being celebrated on Saturday, the 5th of October, 2024. A big shout out to all teachers around the world who dedicate so much time, effort, and energy to ensure that young people have a chance of succeeding in life, particularly to teachers who work in specialist settings, whether they're schools, colleges, or PRUs, or even smaller independent schools, where they ensure that young people thrive. And you've been listening to amazing guests, and the final guest here with me was Lauretta. Lauretta, thank you so much for your time. We wish you all the best at your school too.
Thank you for having me. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Do tune in next week, listeners, when we will take on another topic here on Send in the Community. Wassalamu alaikum.
Coming up next, English Talk Series. Continue listening to Inspire FM.
Inspire FM, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, only on 105.1 FM.
Luton's most luxurious venue for Asian weddings is now bigger and better than ever before. With 2 venues to choose from, Venue Central can provide the ultimate setting for your wedding. 2 huge venues, 1 high standard, right in the centre of Luton. Visit us online today at venuecentral.co.uk or call us now on 01582 451 767. Venue Central, affordable luxury in a central location.
Did you see that guy on TV?
What, that no comment guy?
Yeah, he was sick. What was his name?
I think it was Atiq Malik.
Yeah, Atiq Malik of Liberty Law Solicitors. Atiq Malik heads up the criminal law team at Liberty Law Solicitors, specialising in everything from serious crime down to road traffic offences.
To find out more or for a free telephone consultation, call 01582 459955.
Liberty Law, there when you need us most.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والتين والزيتون وطور سينين وهذا البلد الأمين لقد خلقنا الإنسان في أحسن تقويم ثم رددناه أسفل سافلين إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات فلهم أجر غير ممنون فما يكذبك بعد بالدين أليس الله بأحكم الحاكمين.
Since October 2023, Gaza faces unprecedented challenges. Muslim charity dedicated to Gaza for a decade steps up in trying times. Clean water, hot meals, and vital medical aid. Your support can deliver hope. £50 for emergency food, £70 for 20 meals, £150 for clean water, and £200 for essential medical aid. Unite at muslimcharity.org.uk/Gaza or call 03000 111 786.
Ibn Taymiyyah, he says, in this dunya, there is Jannah. Whoever does not enter this Jannah in this dunya, he shall not be admitted to Jannah in the Akhirah. What is the Jannah in the dunya? The Jannah of Salah, the Jannah of Dhikr, the Jannah of the station of the Quran, the Jannah of being close to Allah. This is the Jannah of this dunya. If you do not enter this Jannah, you will not be able to enter the Jannah of Akhirah.
Head over to inspirefm.org to check out our new website. Missed a show or want to listen back to an old one? Want to know about upcoming schedules or maybe keep up to date with events going on? Don't worry, it can be found right here on www.inspirefm.org. As well as that, have a question, query or comment, find the contact details right here and become part of your community radio station. For the community, by the community.
From the studios of Inspire FM, the time is now 8 o'clock.
From the heart of Bedfordshire in Luton on 105.1 FM. This is Inspire FM News.
This is the national and international news today, Wednesday, 2nd of October for Inspire FM, read by Shaheen Mirza. First, the headlines. Israel says intense fighting in South Lebanon. UK forces involved in response to Iran attacks on Israel. 7 killed in shooting and knife attack in Tel Aviv. US dock workers strike, halting half the nation's ocean shipping. Starmer facing EU demands on migration, fishing and youth mobility as it begins Brexit reset talks. Children in youth offender institutions in England denied access to education, report finds. And that concludes today's news roundup.
Always up to date with everything that's happening locally, nationally and internationally. This is Inspire FM.
We are now going to play an episode of Democracy Now!, an independent news program hosted by award-winning journalist Amy Goodman and Juan Gonzalez. The views represented in this program are those of the individuals and not necessarily represent those of Inspire FM.
This news is funded by viewers like you. Please support our work at democracynow.org/give. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Lebanon's marking 3 days of mourning after Israel assassinates Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah Friday in a massive attack that leveled multiple high-rise apartment buildings in the suburbs south of Beirut. Nasrallah had led Hezbollah since 1992, was widely considered one of the most powerful figures in the Middle East. Multiple news outlets report Israel likely used U.S.-made 2,000-pound Blue 109 bombs in the attack. President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris both described Nasrallah's death as a, quote, measure of justice. But on the streets of Beirut, Lebanese residents vowed to keep resisting the Israeli attacks.
You won't be able to destroy us. Whatever you do, however much you bomb, however much you displace people, we will stay here. We won't leave. This is our country, and we're staying. Do whatever you want to do. We don't care.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave the order to kill Nasrallah shortly after giving a speech at the United Nations General Assembly here in New York. As he was being introduced at the UN, dozens of diplomats walked out of the General Assembly hall in protest. Iran responded to the assassination of Nasrallah by seeking an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council, warning Israel is, quote, pushing the entire region into an all-out catastrophe, unquote. A prominent general in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard was also killed in Friday's attack on Nasrallah. Over the past 24 hours, Israeli strikes in Lebanon killed at least 105 people, bringing the death toll over the past 2 weeks to more than 1,000 Lebanese, with 6,000 people injured. The Israeli attacks have also displaced about 1 million people in Lebanon. More than 100,000 have fled from Lebanon to Syria. Earlier today, Israel killed the head of Hamas in Lebanon, along with his wife, son, and daughter, in a strike on their home in a Palestinian refugee camp. A separate strike inside Beirut. Israel killed 3 members of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Fears are now growing Israel may soon launch a ground invasion of Lebanon. Earlier today, Hezbollah's deputy leader, Sheikh Naim Qassem, vowed the group is ready to confront an Israeli invasion. In Gaza, Israel is continuing to attack schools where displaced Palestinians have sought shelter. Earlier today, an Israeli warplane bombed a school in Beit Lahia, killing at least 2 people. In Deir al-Balah, another Israeli strike killed Palestinian journalist Wafa al-Udaini and 3 of her family members, including 2 children. On Sunday, at least 4 people were killed in northern Gaza in another Israeli strike on a school turned shelter. Israel also launched a large attack on Yemen's port of Hodeidah on Sunday, one day after the Houthis fired a missile at Tel Aviv. The Yemeni health ministry said at least 4 people were killed and 29 injured in the Israeli attack. An unprecedented tragedy. Those were the words of North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper after Hurricane Helene devastated a swath of the country from Florida to Tennessee. The storm's death toll is nearing 100 and expected to rise as search and rescue teams reach areas cut off by catastrophic flooding and landslides. Millions have lost power in what's expected to become one of the costliest hurricanes in U.S. history. At least 30 deaths occurred in Buncombe County, North Carolina, where the city of Asheville has been largely cut off after the Shenandoah River crested 6 feet above previous records, flooding entire neighborhoods. Asheville officials said residents may not have access to clean water for weeks after the storm severely damaged the city's water treatment plant and piping system. Food and water are now being airlifted into Asheville since many roads leading in the area have been destroyed. Hurricane Helene made landfall on Friday in Florida's Big Bend as a 140-mile-per-hour Category 4 hurricane that had been fueled by abnormally warm water in the Gulf of Mexico. On Saturday, Greenpeace posted a message on social media reading, quote, "Hurricane Helene must be a wake-up call for climate justice." In Nepal, nonstop monsoon rains and floods over the weekend killed nearly 200 people as rescue teams continue to search through the wreckage in the capital, Kathmandu. People were left marooned on rooftops as streets turned into rivers and major roadways became blocked. It was Kathmandu's heaviest rainfall in half a century as the climate crisis intensifies extreme weather events. Spanish authorities say 48 people are missing after a boat carrying refugees from Mali, Mauritania, and Senegal capsized near the Canary Islands. 9 deaths, including a child, have been confirmed. Another 27 people have been rescued. The disaster could become the deadliest in the Canary Islands in 30 years. A Spanish nonprofit reports an average of 33 deaths per day for refugees trying to reach Spain in the first 5 months of this year, as many European governments continue to crack down on asylum seekers and promote xenophobic rhetoric. In Austria, the far-right Freedom Party won this weekend's parliamentary election, edging out the ruling conservatives and sending shockwaves throughout Europe. But it's unclear if the Freedom Party will be able to form a governing coalition, as all of its rivals have ruled out collaboration. Party leader Herbert Kickl ran on a nationalist platform pledging to restrict asylum and migration and expel non-EU citizens. The Freedom Party was founded in the wake of World War II by former Nazis. On Sunday, protesters gathered outside the Parliament building in Vienna chanting, "Nazis, get out of Parliament."
That means social cuts for Austria. That means lower salaries. That means a catastrophe, especially for migrants and for the women who are demonstrating in favor of abortion again. We started demonstrating 40 years ago, and I can't do it anymore.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused Moscow of waging war on hospitals after Russia struck a hospital in the city of Sumy, killing 10 people. Meanwhile, Ukraine launched one of its largest drone strikes on Russia Saturday night. Russian military authorities report they shot down 125 drones during the attack. Authorities in Egypt are refusing to release Alaa Abdel Fattah, the country's most prominent political prisoner. He was due to be released on Sunday after serving a 5-year sentence, but his sentence has been extended by another 2 years. Last week, a coalition of 59 civil society organizations called for Egypt to release the British Egyptian activist. His mother, Leila Swaith, spoke to Reuters last week.
I'm definitely angry, really angry from the way things are happening, and of course angry about him continuing to be imprisoned. He wasn't supposed to be in jail for 5 years, let alone the 5 years before in his first jail term. I'm angry about what happened now and what is happening, but I don't have the feeling that I was expecting something to happen, and it did not happen. I never expect good things.
To see our interviews with Alaa's mother and sister in Egypt, go to democracynow.org. Vice President Kamala Harris visited the U.S.-Mexico border in Arizona Friday and pushed for new restrictions on asylum seekers.
Those who cross our borders unlawfully will be apprehended and removed and barred from re-entering for 5 years. We will pursue more severe criminal charges against repeat violators. And if someone does not make an asylum request at a legal point of entry and instead crosses our border unlawfully, they will be barred from receiving asylum.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump is escalating his anti-immigrant rhetoric, describing immigrants as animals during a campaign rally in Wisconsin.
They don't commit crimes like us. No. They make our criminals look like babies. These are stone cold killers. They'll walk into your kitchen. They'll cut your throat.
During the same speech, he claimed Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were both mentally impaired. Meanwhile, Senator J.D. Vance and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz are preparing for Tuesday's vice presidential debate here in New York. In other election news, the Department of Justice has sued the state of Alabama after it purged more than 3,000 names from its voter rolls. In California, Governor Gavin Newsom is facing backlash from artists, lawmakers, labor groups, and others after he vetoed a bill Sunday that sought to regulate the artificial intelligence industry. The bill would have required tech companies to stress test AI models before releasing them on the market, held companies legally liable for harms caused by their AI technology, and enabled a kill switch for AI technology that was abused or went rogue. Backers of the bill accused Governor Newsom of being in the pocket of Silicon Valley. In Georgia, a fire at the Biolab chemical plant in Conyers sent massive plumes of thick smoke into the air Sunday, prompting the evacuation of some 17,000 residents and shelter-in-place orders for others. It's Biolab's third fire in 7 years. Conyers has a majority Black population. This news is funded by viewers like you. Please support our work at democracynow.org/give. News reports from northern Israel show Israeli military tanks massing along the Israel-Lebanon border after Israel launched its first attack in central Beirut. Earlier today, Israel struck a building near the busy Kola Bridge intersection of the Lebanese capital after carrying out a massive attack Friday on a Beirut suburb that assassinated Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. He led Hezbollah for more than 3 decades and was considered one of the most powerful figures in the Middle East. Israel likely used U.S.-made bombs in Friday's attack that leveled several high-rise apartment buildings. President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris both called the killing of Nasrallah a, quote, measure of justice. Meanwhile, Monday's attack targeted senior figures in the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, a Palestinian militant group. The strike leveled another apartment building.
We're Palestinian firefighters and rescuers from the camps in Lebanon who came to help our brothers after the raid that happened here in Ain ed-Delb. We've been here since yesterday, since the incident. We have not left the site, and we will remain here until we complete the entire mission, God willing. There are still people under the rubble, people we have not been able to rescue yet. We are doing everything we can to save them as quickly as possible.
So today, Israel killed the head of Hamas in Lebanon, along with his wife, son, and daughter, in a strike on their home in a Palestinian refugee camp. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave the order to kill Nasrallah shortly after giving a speech before the UN General Assembly. Before his remarks, dozens of diplomats walked out of the UN General Assembly hall in protest. Today, Hezbollah's deputy leader, Sheikh Naim Qassem, vowed to fight on, saying the group is prepared for a long war in his first speech since Nasrallah was killed.
تعتدي إسرائيل بارتكاب المجازر في كل مناطق لبنان.
Israel's committing massacres in all areas of Lebanon and choosing villages one by one until there is no village or house that does not have traces of Israeli aggression in it. It is attacking civilians, health organizations, all Rizallah scouts, all those who are in the streets, and all those who are staying in their homes, including children, women, and the elderly. These people are not fighting the fighters, but rather are killing and committing massacres against civilians and innocents. The Islamic resistance will continue to confront the Israeli enemy in support of Gaza and Palestine in defense of Lebanon.
Over the past 24 hours, Israeli strikes in Lebanon have killed at least 105 people, bringing the death toll over the past 2 weeks to over 1,000, with 6,000 people injured. The Israeli attacks have displaced about 1 million people in Lebanon. More than 100,000 have fled from Lebanon to Syria, according to the United Nations. Meanwhile, Israel forces launched a wave of airstrikes on Yemen Sunday, targeting the city of Hodeidah for the second time in recent months in response to missile fires by Houthi militants. This comes as more than 1,000 Israelis protested in Tel Aviv on Saturday to call on Prime Minister Netanyahu to refocus his efforts on securing the release of hostages in Gaza, where the death toll from nearly a year of Israeli attacks is nearing at least 42,000. For more, we begin in Beirut to speak with Karim Chahayeb, the Beirut-based journalist reporting on Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq for the Associated Press. His recent piece for AP is headlined, "What to Know After Israel's Assassination of Hezbollah Leader Hassan Nasrallah." Karim, welcome to Democracy Now! Well, why don't you tell us about the significance of this assassination and who exactly the Hezbollah leader was?
So this assassination really rattled all of Lebanon. Hassan Nasrallah for decades led Hezbollah and oversaw significant developments within the militant group. Oversaw, ending Israel's occupation of southern Lebanon, Hezbollah's sort of transformation into having a more heavy involvement in Lebanese politics with MPs, parliamentarians, ministers, and so on. And also led Hezbollah when it began to expand more regionally, notably in Syria, where they played a pivotal role in keeping Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in power. The news really shocked all of Lebanon, both supporters and people who oppose him. I recall I was on the streets here in Beirut when the news happened, and some of his supporters were screaming. They were shocked by the news, and they thought that this was a leader. Some told me that they felt like he was immortal. Almost. And of course, his assassination on top of a handful of Hezbollah leaders, 7 senior leaders over the past 8 days, really rattled the organization. Even the deputy leader, Naim Qassem, said so today. But he said that they're going to regroup and appoint a new leader soon. It's unclear when. And it's definitely something that rattled the region, for sure.
I want to go to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu speaking this weekend.
Nasrallah was not just another terrorist. He was the terrorist. He was the axis of the axis, the main engine of Iran's axis of evil. He and his people were the architects of the plan to destroy Israel. As long as Nasrallah was alive, he would have quickly rebuilt the capabilities we took from Hezbollah. Therefore, I gave the directive, and Nasrallah is no longer with us.
If you can respond, Kareem, to what the Israeli prime minister said after the assassination, and also what has happened since, both the killing of a top-level Iranian commander along with Nasrallah, and now the head of Hamas in Lebanon with his family.
So, a lot of people after the assassination of Nasrallah sort of wondered, what happens next now? The Israeli government maintains that their goal is to, secure their north for their residents to return. And, since the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, other senior officials have been assassinated as well. And the airstrikes, aren't stopping. They're continuing. And now people are anticipating a ground invasion. And of course, experts say that Iran is sort of in a policy dilemma. Iran has dealt with several attacks that are widely blamed on Israel, including a strike on a consulate building in Syria and the killing of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran in late July. Iran hasn't necessarily responded in such a decisive way. And the question is, what are Tehran's red lines? We don't know how they're going to respond to that and what this means for the region. What we do know is that they've sort of maintained that they're going to keep piling diplomatic pressure. This is according to statements from different Iranian government officials. But the big question is, given the the severity of this attack, will this eventually not just widen the war in Lebanon, but also have a regional component? Iran has proxies in Yemen and Iraq, and there's a lot of speculation as to whether they will be involved or not. So there's a really big sort of gap as to what happens next in this very intense phase of the war.
Kareem, we're speaking to you in Beirut, so you're not only a journalist covering all of this, you're a resident there. Can you describe what the blast was like in the suburb on Friday, and then this Beirut-based blast that just took place?
Yeah, the airstrike in the Beirut southern suburbs that killed Hassan Nasrallah was probably one of the most, if not the most intense strike thus far in this conflict. Eyewitnesses and others, even as actually close to this office, heard 8 to 10 explosions. There were multiple airstrikes, and it leveled several buildings to the ground. It was a very shocking experience for many here. A lot of people were, panicking, and it definitely sparked a wave of displacement. A lot of people in the Beirut southern suburbs, immediately fled their homes and, went in large groups to other neighborhoods in Beirut to find safety. And then the strike yesterday near the Kola Bridge, it's a very central part of the city. It's very busy during the day. It's a critical point for public transportation as well. And this is the most central part of Beirut where Israel has struck so far in this conflict. And a lot of the questions now among people here is where else will be hit, given that it appears that central parts of the city could be possible targets, and this is not limited to just the south or the east of Lebanon anymore. So there's a lot of fear and anxiety and confusion among residents all over Beirut, where over the past, previous months, where the fighting was mostly limited to southern Lebanon, you didn't really feel that so much.
And we just have reports, and this has been going on for days, of Israeli tanks amassing along the border. What is the response of the Lebanese to what is taking place? Lebanon has one of the most, if not the highest percentage refugee population in the world. Now, 1 million people are displaced. Many are trying to go into Syria right now.
Yes, so the Lebanese government has sounded the alarm on a massive displacement. Prior to this recent intense escalation, I guess, there was over 100,000 displaced people. Now that number is almost 1 million in such a short period of time. The Lebanese government is struggling to keep up. Remember, this is a country that's going through an economic crisis. The government is essentially broke, and the United Nations is trying to get as much funds as it can to support. And a lot of what's helping these displaced people here is just the goodwill of a lot of people, community initiatives, and so on. A lot of people I speak to in Beirut and elsewhere are doing their best, but they're questioning how sustainable it is, within just a couple of weeks. And yes, it does seem like a larger number are going to Syria as well. So it's indicative of the desperation taking place. And of course, a possible ground invasion is certainly the talk of the town right now. And people are wondering what the consequences will be, whether it means this war will last for a much longer time and it will further widen the displacement. So, it is definitely a critical time. The Lebanese government, is trying to sort of push a recent, U.S.-led initiative for a temporary ceasefire for 21 days. The French foreign ministers in town met with the prime minister and the speaker of parliament. And, it appears that the message that they're sending is that they're willing to, go about the ceasefire and, and try and put an end to this war as quickly as possible. The question is whether, Hezbollah at the same time, whether they will change their approach to this. Hezbollah maintained even after Nasrallah's assassination that they will stop once there's a ceasefire in Gaza. And they accused the Israelis and the American government of basically wanting them to set up a deal independent of Gaza. So the question really is, how can this diplomatic gridlock be broken? And I think we could be at a major turning point right now, given the heightened developments.
Do you see Lebanese troops joining or replacing Hezbollah militants on the border?
There is certainly a lot of speculation that has come about, the fate of Lebanon politically and with the war after Nasrallah's assassination. There are allied groups to Hezbollah that have been involved in the south since the beginning. For example, the Fajr brigades of the Islamic group, which is the branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. Hamas early on as well here in Lebanon were involved as well. The question, of course, is if there's a ground invasion, will more groups allied that have, some sort of weapons be involved? Appears that most experts say that it might actually be more about the allies of Hezbollah outside.
Assalamu alaikum. In Luton and its surrounding areas, it is now time for Salat al-Isha.
लुटन और इसके मज़ाफ़ात में नमाज इशा का वक्त हुआ चाहता है.
This azan has been sponsored by Ideal Properties. Contact us on 01582 721110 or log on to www.idealpropertiesltd.co.uk.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته إنك لا تخلف الميعاد.
Would you like to sponsor the Azan? If so, give us a call on 01582 481 810 or email us on info@inspirefm.org.
From the studios of Inspire FM, the time is now 8:30.
We are now going to play an episode of Democracy Now!, an independent news program hosted by award-winning journalist Amy Goodman and Juan Gonzalez. The views represented in this program are those of the individuals and not necessarily represent those of Inspire FM.
This news is funded by viewers like you. Please support our work at democracynow.org/give. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report, as Israel strikes central Beirut, Yemen, and Gaza after the massive attack Friday in the Beirut suburb that killed the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, one of the most powerful figures in the region. We're joined by Gideon Levy. He is an Israeli journalist, author, columnist for Haaretz, as well as a member of its editorial board. His latest piece, Israel's Barbaric Glee over Nasrallah's assassination, is a new low for Israeli society. Gideon, thanks so much for joining us again. If you can start off by talking about what happened on Friday. You have Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, ascending the podium at the UN General Assembly, apparently right after he gave the go-ahead for the assassination of Nasrallah. Right before he came up on the podium, dozens of world leaders walked out. If you can talk about the significance of this decision and then the bombing of Yemen and, of course, the continuation of the assault on Gaza.
You know, Amy, listening to your program is enough. Israel is shooting here and Israel is assassinating there and Israel is bombing here and Israel is bombing there. Where are we aiming to? I mean, all those operations might be, at least part of them are justified. But what comes next? This thought that Israel can solve everything by force and the war is always the first answer for everything must change, because otherwise we will really find ourselves one day totally lonely in the world. Even the United States, which supports Israel still blindly and automatically, and I must emphasize in your show that the United States is a full partner for everything that Israel is doing in the last year, including the massacre in Gaza. Even the United States will wake up one day, and then what?
So talk about the assassination of Nasrallah. You're talking to us from Tel Aviv and the response in Israel.
I'll give you a few examples. In one of the main channels of Israeli TV, a reporter live was distributing chocolates. That's the spirit in Israel. That's the spirit. Another important columnist wrote, "We smashed him like a lizard." I mean, if this is the atmosphere, this is the mindset, this is the zeitgeist even, so it will be very hard to change things, because we are getting down and down, lower and lower, believing more and more only in one thing, namely in killing and destructing.
So if you can talk about what Netanyahu's strategy is, and if he has one other than a military strategy. You have the tanks, Israeli tanks amassing on the border. Do you see a ground invasion of Lebanon happening? at this point. What does this mean? Does he just want to deplete Hezbollah or completely wipe it out?
I can't see a scenario in which Israel is not going for a ground operation. First, it will be, as usual, presented as a very, very limited one, limited in time, limited in territory. We've been in those shows many times. And then it will get complicated, and then we'll have to widen it and extend the time that we stay there. As usual, we are getting into those things without having any clue, any idea how will we get out of it. Look at Israel in Gaza. Nobody has a clue how we are getting out of Gaza. We're not getting out of Gaza. Israel is going to repeat the same mistake with Lebanon, using the excuse or the passiveness of the world, which allows Israel to do now whatever it wants. Netanyahu, I think, is also now in euphoria after what is perceived in Israel as wonderful successes, James Bond successes, first with the pagers and with the walkie-talkies, and then with all the assassinations. This is perceived in Israel as an enormous success. So riding on this success, I guess nothing will stop Israel to get into a ground operation. And then, there will be a moment that a regional war might become a factor, might become a reality. And then what? When Iran might come in? I mean, all those risks seem unimportant, unreal. And if Iran comes into the picture, what's next? We will bomb Iran. This whole mindset of bombing and bombing for 1 year now, and only bombing, and refusing any kind of diplomacy. Remember, there were deals to release the hostages. Israel said no, ceasefire.